have to get up now. You have to get up now.
No choice.
You'd look bad if you didn't.
Look behind you. Everyone
else has stood up.
Yeah.
Who else has not gotten up?
Anyone still in your seat, up you get.
We will not allow it.
Yeah, I've remembered the faces of the ones that didn't stand up.
Oh my gosh.
That's fine. That's
So
all right.
nice to see the two of you. I would like to know if you two knew each other before making this movie.
We did. We
How?
have a mutual friend, Richard Curtis, the incredible writer-director.
Let me pick that name up.
Yeah,
right
just
here.
while I...
The guy who did Love Actually and Four Weddings and a Funeral, by the way.
Yes, Love Actually.
Right.
Yeah, so we met in New York at a dinner party that him and Emma had put on, and I loved Saoirse the minute I met her, and I've always loved her work, and so this was great.
How long ago was that?
It was when I was doing the play. It was when I was doing the Crucible, so it was like 3 years ago.
More than that, I think. No?
Well, it was right. You did the Crucible right after Brooklyn.
Yeah,
Right
it was
after
while
the award
Brooklyn was
season,
coming
right,
out.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, so that sounds about right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, was there a plan hatched at any point? Like, wouldn't it be fun if we
If
could do
you
something
played
together?
Mary Stuart and I played a Queen
Yeah.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, right. Or if we just did something together. I mean, did you dare to dream?
We didn't talk.
It
we didn't
wasn't sort
chat-
of like
we
a
didn't chat
business
shop. We're just kind of chatting. No, we didn't.
Just chatting about life.
Yeah,
you know,
the important things.
putting the world to rights.
Yeah.
But it was, and then we bumped into each other at, it would have been at the Oscars then, like a month or so later.
Really?
As you do.
As
You don't
again.
remember that.
Oh yeah, and your mum was there.
and you
yes.
had a lovely gold dress on.
Yeah.
And then it was like a year later that Mary was finally coming together, because it took years to get off the ground, and people had kind of come and gone, and it was a real journey to get it. I mean, I've been talking to you for years, and every single time I do an interview, I'm like, well, hopefully this year I'll get to do Mary Queen of Scots,
I know,
you know.
that's right.
So 6 years later, it was finally ready to go, yeah. And
We never have to talk again. You
we
and I.
never
We're
have to
done.
talk. Thank God, is all I can say. I've got my Fandango card. I don't need anything else now.
I don't work there anymore.
But
That's okay.
yeah, so it's good I
Right.
got it while
Yeah,
you weren't
thank
there,
God,
'cause
yeah.
they won't give it to me now.
Right.
And it all just sort of came together, and I don't know, I think it was something we were both really excited about. It is quite lovely to work with someone who you know is like normal, and apart from being talented, but so nice to know that we were both sort of on the same page and worked in a similar way. So that was lovely to know that you were going to be surrounded by that.
This is a relationship that has been, on stage. Janet McTeer did it on Broadway, and so many different places it's been done. But I just think it's also still very illuminating and educational for me and a lot of other people, even if you've seen the movie, just to remind yourself. Margot, were you super knowledgeable about this relationship and this story?
Super knowledgeable. Yes. I was. I knew nothing, next to nothing. Embarrassingly little I knew about this subject, about the Renaissance period, about Mary Stuart, even about Elizabeth. I didn't know too much more than just the general image in my mind of the scary white face and super red wig and crazy big dresses. That was the extent of my knowledge. So I really started at the bottom, and fortunately I had many hours with John Guy, who's a brilliant historian, and he kind of filled my head with a lot of knowledge, and I did a lot of reading and research and watching, and now I know everything there is to know. Test me.
So John Guy is the man who wrote the book that Beau Willimon adapted for this, right? And I mean, as an Australian actress, I'm sure you watched like Cate Blanchett doing this character, obviously.
No, and she's my favorite actress, and for some reason I'd never seen the Elizabeth films. Thank God. Otherwise,
Too scary.
Yeah. So I intentionally didn't watch anyone else's version of Elizabeth because it was already terrifying enough to take on the character who's been played by my idols.
Now that you've done it, and done it very well, by the way, as I'm sure you all agree, do you feel courageous enough to like put the Shakespeare in Love DVD in, or see Judi Dench, or put the Elizabeth DVD?
I'm going to watch all of them now. I'm going to watch every single one of them.
That's so great.
Yeah.
So, okay, so Saoirse, if you were involved, I'm learning a lot right now. I didn't realize it. I guess I had forgotten this is something that you've been doing for so long. It all went over my head and all the other conversations we've had. So you've been working on this for a while. So at some point, different permutations had come and gone, and then someone came to you and said, what about Margot?
Yeah, we were finally at a stage where we had Josie directing, we had Beau doing the script, and it was about finding all the other missing pieces to make it a solid project. And before Beau came on board, Elizabeth wasn't as much a part of the story, and so he incorporated that relationship into it quite a bit more than it had been in other drafts. So it was a much bigger discussion then once we had that, once we sort of had the trajectory of the story. And as I said, I had met Margot and loved her, and I was saying earlier that like I think you can kind of, I mean, you're all actors, I'm assuming, you can tell in someone's performances, I think, whether they're like a solid person or not. And I think when someone consistently gives like very, you know, performances that really have like a heart and a gut to them, and they're like properly sincere, you kind of think like, I reckon that person's pretty sound. And I always felt that whenever I'd see Margot stuff. No, seriously, I would, you know, and I do. I think there's some actors that really go for it, and I think she's one of them. And so it seemed like a really exciting thing to have her on board, and then everything else fell into place.
So you have Josie Rourke, who's a theater director, doing this film as a director. You have Beau Willimon, of course, who did like House of Cards and Ides of March and so many great things as the writer. Were you a fan of their other stuff, and that's what caused you to kind of gravitate towards each of them, to have them come along? Yeah, well,
Tim and Eric from Mark and Title brought Josie on, and I met her, but they were really excited about having her on board. And then they asked me what I thought of Beau, and I was such a huge fan of Beau's, and I just thought it was such a clever thing to not only get someone who wasn't from the UK to write the script, who could just be almost a little bit more clinical about the whole thing, but also somebody who was very good at writing like political thrillers that have like pace and have like a modernity to them. Yep. And he's very, very good at that. And he keeps things moving. And I think sometimes with these period dramas, they can get a bit stuffy and they can sort of fall flat a little bit, as we all know. And to bring someone in who's just very sort of like, I don't know, very fresh and energetic in the way he writes was really clever, I think.
So, okay, so I'm sitting with an Australian actress playing English and an Irish actress playing Scottish. Who had it rougher? Who was more fish out of water?
I have to say, Saoirse had to also speak French fluently.
With a Scottish accent?
No, you drop it.
Weird.
I'd like to hear that.
S'il vous plaît. Bonjour. Comment ça va? Yeah, I don't know if that would have worked.
So I think you had it tougher.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, maybe.
You're so good at accents. We were doing rehearsals. We were doing rehearsals, and you know, I'm still figuring it out. Oh gosh, where are we? And so, you know, we've got our scripts, and Saoirse's like, yeah, let's read through this bit. I don't really have it yet. Drops the script, gets up, and like off book. Perfect Scottish accent, fluent French, just like does this monologue, and I was like, holy shit, like I need to lift my game. This is whoa, it was like phenomenal. I think she had far more to do in that regard.
I remember doing an interview with you for Brooklyn, and I was like, oh, you know, how are you excited, Saoirse, that you got to finally use like your actual accent in Brooklyn? She's like, I'm not doing my actual accent. It's a different Irish accent, and I felt so dumb. But you were very sweet about it. But Irish and Scottish, they're not. I mean, they're pretty different.
They are. I mean, to be honest, when it came to the accent, it wasn't that biggest a jump for me, because you know, you can have different sounds with accents, but like the cadence of certain accents are really similar, and the melody of them. And what I found so liberating about doing the Scottish accent is that even though it is a different accent to my own, the way they speak and the rhythm that they speak in is very similar to an Irish accent. So I actually just have to do a Scottish accent and it's exactly the same thing. Like, it doesn't change the way... That was me doing a Scottish accent, by the way. In case you didn't pick up on that. But it doesn't really change the way in which I speak, which was really freeing for me, actually, because even in Brooklyn, I was playing someone who was, you know, living in the 50s, quite reserved rural Irish girl, so it was quite different from my very forward Dublin accent, whereas with the Scottish accent I was able to be very sort of passionate and fiery and in your face and all that sort of stuff, which was great.
So fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a question from Amanda. Raise your hand. She's shy. Hi. Amanda wants to know about the rehearsal experience on this film, as well as your thoughts and feelings about the rehearsal process prior to shooting a film. What did Josie allow for on this one?
Well, Josie's a theatre director. This was her first feature film. And she really took the same approach, I feel, as she would prepare, maybe not the exact same, but, you know, kind of a bit of the rehearsal process that she would for a theatrical production, which meant a lot of rehearsal, which, as you guys know, probably... It's quite a rare, and you know, it's a rare thing for film, and it's a luxury. You know, most films maybe a day, 3 days maybe. I mean, I once did a film where we got like a month rehearsal, but that was a different thing. And you know, this was far more rehearsal time than I'd definitely ever done in a film before, and it was great. And she had all these clever things. You know, sometimes we'd play like... I've never done theatre, so when we got to play theatre games, I was like, this is so fun. I love it. That thing where we like clap our hands and like, anyways, it was like, it was so great. I'd never done that before. You knew how to do it. Everyone knew how to do it because everyone pretty much had done, zip zap. Yeah, I was loving that. So it was fun things like that. And then it was also very clever things. Like this one day she set up the English court next to the Scottish court, and the Scottish court she'd set up in a circle, as you see it depicted in the film. And the English court, we sat in a rectangle around the table, and I sat at the head of the table. And it was very clear that it was two very different types of government run in two very different types of way. In Scotland, there was, you know, more fluidity, and the power came from the people up. And in England, it was more rigid, and the power came from the top down to the people. And we ran our scenes that you see intercut between each court, you know, right next to each other. And that I thought was just, you know, genius. And like I said, such a luxury. You rarely get to, you know, even have the rehearsal period, let alone get to rehearse to that extent. I found it really helpful.
Saoirse, do you like the theatre games?
Oh yeah, oh god, yeah. Well, I worked with Eva Van Hove, so we didn't play a lot of games.
Ooh.
We didn't do a lot. We just sort of started saying the stuff straight away. So it was quite new for me as well.
Good.
But we got to do a lot of like choreography rehearsals, which was great, and just having time to not feeling like you have to turn up on day one and have it all figured out. You know, I basically spent a few months prepping and doing horse riding and early costume fittings and meeting up with Josie and some of the other cast members like Jack and Margot and all that lot. So it was really nice to not feel like you were stepping straight into the lion's den on day one. You know, you had time to sort of like settle into it, which was great.
Here's a related question from Mary Jacobson, who has fabulous handwriting. And where are you? I just want to see you. Your handwriting is amazing. Mary wants to know, beyond the dialogue, how did you prepare to embody or physically represent this time period?
For me, it was the choreography. So Wayne McGregor, I don't know if you guys have heard of him, but he worked with the Royal Ballet in the UK and still does actually, and he's had a TED Talk. He's a pretty big deal, and he is incredible, and he's like one of the best people I've ever worked with. He was so helpful for me and for the girls as well who played the Marys, because I think we really needed to know how to sort of move around each other. I think when a group of people know each other so well and are so comfortable with one another, it's sort of seamless and fluid how they move around one another and how they interact. And that was just a really great way to get into the role, and sort of figuring out like how she presented herself physically in public versus when she was in her intimate private chambers. He would talk to me about how just sort of like keeping your back straight when I'm doing something like this, and how when I go back to my hotel room after this I'll be like this because I'm knackered. And that's exactly, we wanted to show that, because any politician we see nowadays, any queen that we know from the past, they did exactly the same thing. They were just as knackered as we are when we do all this stuff, and like it was really important to embody that. And that was a really great way for me of getting out of my head about who the historical character was and embodying the role that I was actually getting a chance to play. So
how about you, Margot?
Yeah, I mean, for every, like Saoirse said, Wayne is incredible, and working with him, I've worked with him before actually, and I find it so helpful. Yeah, on Tarzan. Yeah, it was great. And for this one, it was, really helpful as well. Simple things like, imagine the room's full of smoke and you're walking through it, like things like that, about having presence was really interesting. And then with any role I play, I work with an acting coach, Nancy Banks. I work with a movement coach, another movement coach, Jean-Louis Rodrigue, who incorporates Alexander technique and animal work, which I find really, really helpful. And obviously a dialect coach. We had William Conacher on this one. So I do actually now started working with a voice coach as well, who's also really great. So I do a lot of stuff.
There are so many phenomenal crafts on this film: the costumes, the makeup, the production design, the way it's shot. Was there something physical on set or in part of the character that was most helpful to you? Like when you put a specific outfit on or costume on, did that really help? When you saw the set, a particular set, did that really help? What did you find really worked to get you in the zone?
For me, a huge part to Finding Mary was familiarising myself with the connection she had to the land and being outdoors. She was very much an outdoorsy type of person, and really was sort of stimulated by the environment that she was in, Scotland, and was just really, as a lot of Scottish people are actually, and Celtic people are in general, they really are people who come from the earth, like they come from the land. And being able to shoot up there for the first 3 weeks, and being in the Highlands and galloping on a horse on the crest of a hill and Glenfeshie and stuff like that was wonderful. And that was such a great way for me to sort of, it's not where I come from, but I felt so proud of it. I felt so proud of that country and the people in it and the beauty of it. It's an incredible place. So I came away from that and we went down to Pinewood Studios and did all the court scenes where I was having to defend this land, and I really felt protective over it. So that really helped me.
Was that a strategic move on the part of Tim and Eric, your producers, and Josie, your director, to give you that experience of being there? Or was it a happy accident in a way?
I think it was a bit of both. I mean, I think they needed the light. So there was that as well, because we were shooting it from September to November. So we needed to get that beautiful sort of clear, clean light that you get around autumn. But I do think as well that from the moment I agreed to do it, I remember at one stage years ago they were like, let's shoot it in Bulgaria, and I was like, no, it's got to be in Scotland. And it was really important for us to feel like we had some sort of part in this place. And there was a lot of amazing Scottish actors that are in the film, but there's 2 Irish actors in it, and 3 actually, and a lot of other people from around the world. And for us to just immerse ourselves in that place was really important. So yeah, I think that did definitely come into it. Yeah,
that's great. What about you, Margot? Was there a set or a piece of wardrobe or makeup that really helped you?
The wardrobe and the makeup was incredibly helpful. I found I obviously wore a lot of prosthetics. I hope you realise that they're prosthetics. Lots of prosthetics. That's not my nose.
We know. That's hilarious.
I have a lot of prosthetics, and a bald cap, and I look really hot. The bald cap, the prosthetics, the wig, the garments, the pox.
The pox were yours.
The pox is me. I was having a rough
everything
week.
else was
I'd been
prosthetics. The
boozing.
pox were yours.
It came out. No, but it was all really restrictive and claustrophobic, and I felt completely trapped by the facade that she'd really created for herself, which was really perfect for the character. That feeling where I can't breathe and I need to escape. I need to rip all this off me and get out of here. That is what I wanted Elizabeth to be feeling like anyway. So it worked so perfectly. Every time they got me in full Elizabeth, her full look, I could find the character so quickly. I could find that feeling so quickly.
Spending the weeks or months that you did in the late 1500s, as it were, did you think about whether it would be appealing in your mind to live in that time?
No.
No, it wouldn't be appealing, or no, you didn't think about it?
No, I don't think it would have been very appealing
Because?
to live in that time. I think women were just kept in close quarters and weren't allowed to do anything. And it's no wonder that they all went absolutely crazy and complained all the time and got bored, because they weren't allowed to do anything and they couldn't move. They couldn't go to the bathroom. It was an uncomfortable, restrictive time, and that existed up until the bloody 50s. So,
Having said that, it would have been better to be around in the Renaissance period than the
Victorian.
and then the medieval time. Before that, I think people would have been letting their hair down after
enjoying
how
themselves a bit more.
grim everything was, because trade lines opened up and there was suddenly this explosion of color and music and culture and food from all over the world, and more people traveled, the more kind of vibrancy there was. So in a lot of ways it was a really fun time compared to what they'd kind of just been living through. Some aspects sounded really, really cool, really fun. Not so much for Mary and Elizabeth.
I think the Renaissance maybe in Scotland and England wasn't that great.
No.
But in Italy and France it would have been
Other parts of
wonderful.
Europe, I think it would have been pretty awesome.
I would have
Way
been
better.
into that.
Shakespeare was a big hit at the time.
Yeah.
There was fun things going on.
Oh my God, there's this guy called William Shakespeare.
William Shakespeare.
Have you read his stuff?
Awesome.
It's great.
But also, no, I think they were actually more sexually liberal than we are today. So, look, it wasn't all bad is what I'm saying.
Right. I don't think it's lost on anyone who watches this movie that a decent part of the downfall of the relationship between Elizabeth and Mary Stuart is the fact that just these asshole men just talk about them to each other, talk about the other one to each other over and over again and rile everybody up around them. Was that something that was intriguing for you guys to explore, the kind of gender politics of it all? Is that that if the two of them had actually, yes, they're writing letters to each other and sending gifts, but they're not getting in a room together, and instead they're letting all these men around them just create this wildfire of rivalry and ridiculousness.
Yeah, no, they did. It's frustrating. Even when I first read the script, I was like, oh, can Cecil just fuck off? Let them meet up. What's the big deal? It would have they could have changed history. They were both, that's the thing, they were both willing to compromise. And the men around them, their male advisors, were not going to budge. And they weren't going to, they were, Cecil in particular, who played by Guy Pearce, worked so hard to keep them apart. And he Cecil, that is, worked so hard even after Mary died to continue to slut shame her, essentially, and doctor records and archives so that future people would still view her in this way. And John Guy, the historian...
And they have done.
Yeah, they have.
That's why it's been so frustrating, even before we made the film, to read all the other accounts of her. And other biographies on Mary got it so wrong.
And so he discovered these archives, more recently, that kind of inspired his work to write his book, and the book inspired Beau's screenplay, and we're finally seeing this other version of Mary, the Mary that she was, the woman she was, this warm, magnetic, incredibly astute, intelligent woman, but these men spent a good portion of their lives trying to paint her as promiscuous and incapable, and it wasn't the case. And yeah, it's a conversation we've had a lot with Josie about, this idea of power and women in positions of power, and how, they were so quick to say she's too emotional to lead and she's too sexual to be a queen, and she's too, they were just, it was incredibly frustrating. And even and I wasn't even playing Mary, and I found it incredibly frustrating to read those things about her. It's
also like such a myth that if you put women together, like they won't get on. That's bollocks. And, we were just saying how it's quite a new thing for us to be in a film where we actually get to work with other actresses, and it's wonderful. And if anything, you feel, and actually there's another Mary here tonight, Eileen, she's over there, she's in the film as well. But when we did rehearsals, we noticed that when all the girls were together, the boys were wonderful and brilliant in every way, but the confidence that we had when we were just on our own, and the suggestions we would make and how creative we were, went through the roof, because we just felt like we were in this safe space, And I guess that's what the film is trying to show as well, is that like it's a very, very scary thing, because who knows what would come out of two powerful women coming together, and who knows what product could come out of that, Right. And it doesn't have to be a scary thing, but for some reason it is.
Well, speaking of two powerful women coming together, it's so wild that you guys have like just that one scene together near the end of the movie. How did Josie and Tim and Eric, the producers, schedule it? Was it like you shot all your stuff, and then you took off, and then you shot all your stuff, and then at the end you guys did your scene together? Where did it fall in the schedule? It
worked out beautifully that they shot everything that took place in England, and everything that took place in Scotland for the most part. And so my last day of shooting, and Saoirse was that scene, and that was Saoirse's first day of shooting. So I'd done my whole, piece throughout the film. I felt like I'd lived this life as Elizabeth. I'd spent all this time with Saoirse in my head, Saoirse's Mary in my head, always obsessing over her, admiring her, worried about, all this stuff constantly in my mind. And then we do the scene, and it was just, we had never seen each other in character up until that moment, ever, not once. And everyone worked really hard to make sure we didn't want to see each other in character before that. And everyone really worked hard to ensure that for us, when even at the beginning of the scene, we still didn't glimpse each other. We were on separate sides of the woods, the forest where we were shooting.
We shot the entire first scene without seeing each other.
Yeah.
And it was only, and we don't know what take they've used, but it's only when they set everything up for that second half of the scene. The camera was set up to shoot Margot's close-up and to shoot my one. And in the first take, I pulled the cloth down, and that was the first time throughout the shoot that I had seen Margot as Elizabeth and she had seen me as Mary, and it was on film. And the adrenaline of that, and the buzz as an actor and as just a person, being able to kind of go, oh shit, we're finally getting to do this, and we're finally getting to do this scene that we've waited so long to do, and it's being recorded by cameras, was wonderful. It was so exciting.
Okay, a couple last things. So did you guys, I want to make sure I'm getting the chronology right. Did you guys wrap this movie, and then you both got nominated for Best Actress at the SAG Awards and Oscars last year?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. We were like,
so, I mean...
Those producers were like, yes.
Yeah, of course. But then you got to spend a lot more time together. Probably on the awards.
Probably more time on the awards circuit than we did shooting the film.
Right, yeah. That's crazy.
I had to hang out every day after that. It was great.
I'm sick for now.
Here's the last question I want to end with, because I love this question from Christian. Where are you, Christian? Just raise your hand. Christian is shy. Oh, hi. Christian wants to know, and I love this. Was there ever any moment where you thought of giving up acting? Not to end on like a downer, but I think it's an interesting question.
Well, we haven't.
Right. You're here now.
I haven't had, one specific incident, time in my life where I'm like, that's it, calling the quits. But I've had many. In fact, the week leading up to the first day of playing every character I've ever played, I have a huge crisis of faith and convince myself that I'm a terrible actor and I'm not actually any good at this job, and I don't know the character, I'll never be able to pull it off. I have like a mini crisis of faith the week before every time. And my husband, like, I just started playing another character 2 weeks ago, and it was the same thing. I was like, this time I can't do it. I can't pull her off. I'm not even any good at this. I'm not even any good. And he's like, okay, you say this every single time. This happens the week leading up. And I was like, it's different this time. This time I really can't do it. And then the first day is done, and I'm like, oh, God, I think I can do this. And he's like, okay, cool. Very patient man. So it's not one particular time, but many times. Every time.
But I think that is the really amazing thing about actors, is that the ones who really, really love it, it doesn't matter how many disappointments you have, or how, uncertain it is, or, how many ups and downs you have throughout it. Like, if the love is there, the love is there. That doesn't go away. It's there for life, even if you don't do it for 20 years. Or in Lady Bird, the woman who played my boyfriend's grandmother hadn't acted since she was like in her 20s, and now she's in her 70s, and she was in Lady Bird, and she was like, I knew I'd always go back to it one day. And like, she always and she was like, I'm so good at this. She improvised. She was amazing, and she was an actor, and that never leaves you. And I think, like, there's been times where I have the same thing every single time I do a job. I'm like, can't do this one, just fire me now. But I think the industry part of it can be disheartening, for sure. But the acting is wonderful, and the acting, I think, I don't know about you guys, but the love that I have for what I do is pure. It's so pure, and there's nothing confusing about it at all. And that's what keeps me, and I've been very, very lucky and very fortunate, but whenever I've had tricky moments professionally or with some of the other faff that goes on around it, I just think, but I love it though. And that never changes. So.
Listen, I know you guys have another one right now, so we're going to let you run off. But I want to say thanks to Saoirse Ronan and Margot Robbie for being here. Guys, thank you so much.